strat.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Mortgage and Real Estate Podcast by the Pinnacle Loans. My name is Chris Giannino, owner-broker of the Pinnacle Loans, and I am joined here today by my brother, Pete Giannino. Pete is a licensed real estate attorney, a contract specialist, and a top-producing loan officer with the Pinnacle Loans. Pete, great to be joined with you today. How's it going?
Thanks, Chris. Happy to be here, of course. Really excited today because we're gonna just get right down to some important strategies and give you real-world examples that will make a difference in the right situations to make your offer as attractive as possible in this very unique environment in real estate. We've had some great successes over the past couple weeks and developed some very important relationships and communication with our agents to employ strategies that work and help clients get the home they want. So today's topic is going to be simply discussing examples, discussing strategies, and changing the way offers are made. So, Chris, I know we kind of joked around before because it seems like there are so many people that rely on the HAP method, the HAP method, the hope and pray. You make an offer, you hope and pray that your offer is selected among the 30 offers the sellers review. But the hope and pray method is generally ineffective. So what we have seen lately is a new method, and that's the essence of today's topic. The new method is the SAP method. Be strategic, be agile, be prepared. SAP sticks. So Chris, let's get into some of these examples and strategies, to use the term strategies with the SAP method that can be effective in this environment.
Absolutely. And I know these, people may be listening to this, and not to say these strategies are going to work in every single situation with every single home buyer, but just by having many conversations with real estate professionals that are among the best in the business in this market, what's been working with our clients and talking to them about what's been working. These are just real life examples. We're going to throw them out there, not hold back any punches. And that way people can take what works. They can not use what's not going to work in that particular situation. But I think it starts with, if there's a real estate agent on both sides of the transaction, it starts with rapport and trust with those two individuals. If I have a buyer and I'm a real estate agent and I approach the listing agent, and I think just simply asking, what is it going to take to win this contract? What are the sellers looking for? I've been hearing is going a long, long way. And you would be surprised on how many people don't even ask that question. So the ones that do, right off the bat, they have a strategic, real, and tangible advantage.
Yeah, it's the old adage of just ask for what is desired. It's don't ask after the offer is made, ask in advance of the offer being made, so you can craft an offer that supports the position of the sellers. Of course, if you know what the sellers are interested in, your offer can be tailored to those desires. So again, that's a very, very simple initial strategy, building rapport with the professionals involved. But then we can get into the into the nuts and bolts of the actual offer itself. So what, some of the things that generally in the real estate industry in a given geographic area, most offers are going to come on the same type of form, and it's going to include various contingencies, notice requirements, time frame requirements. So we can talk about some of those specific provisions, and I know, Chris, you've had some really interesting outcomes in the last couple of weeks. So, we probably need to share some of that information as we go, and how people address what other strategies people use in connection with the actual contract itself.
Yes, absolutely. So that goes into let's just start with that SAP method, like you said. The strategic. So you want to come up with a strategy. That means a strategy that involves the real estate professional, the mortgage loan officer, and the buyers. What's the strategy? What's the approach? I had a buyer call me a couple of weeks ago and asked about removing the appraisal contingency. And in this particular situation, on our end, as a mortgage banker, as a broker, we are able to review that ahead of time. So in this instance, once we have the specific address, I put it into the system to see if this particular situation and address would qualify for a property inspection waiver, meaning the bank would not require an appraisal. And if that's the case, then they can confidently remove the appraisal contingency rider from the contract. And that's going to strengthen their offer. Obviously, if you get two contracts and one for the seller has to negotiate whether the appraisal hits value or doesn't hit value, and the other one says, listen, we won't even get an appraisal. We want the house no matter what. So in this case, they did qualify for a property inspection waiver. So just the fact that they called ahead of time and we were able to review that and know for certain, creating certainty for the buyer and the seller that a appraisal would not be required, put them in a much stronger position to win that contract.
Yeah, and that's what that initial offer. That's part of the initial drafting. Before the offer is submitted, it provides, like Chris said, certainty, but also some level of comfort on both sides. So on the buyer side, comfort knowing that at least there's some algorithm that supports the purchase price, the offer price, and also that on the seller side, that the seller doesn't have to worry about an out on the part of the buyer with respect to the appraisal coming in low. And it saves money. You don't need an appraisal. So that's a great, simple strategy that can be implemented at the outset in terms of drafting that offer. So, there are other contingencies, and I know we talk about inspection contingency. That's a commonly that comes up commonly in real estate contracts. So, what are some ways to address the inspection contingency?
Yeah, and I'll just address another example. An example that I did for the last home that I purchased was I knew that there was no chance of me winning that contract if I had an inspection contingency in there. Now, there's different ways to approach that by the way the contract is written. One way is we are going to get an inspection, but we will not ask for any repairs to be made by the seller. Another option is to remove that clause and say and then in that instance where they leave it on, they're still able to get out of the contract if they see something they don't like or it's a huge repair that they don't want to address. We're not going to ask you to make the correction to the home, but we're also not going to purchase the home, so it gives them an out. If you remove that contingency, then you're basically saying, yeah, we still might get an inspection. However, we are not going to ask for any repairs, and we are not going to be getting out of the contract. Now, that's an aggressive step, many people would say. However, different houses have different values to different people. The same house is worth two different things to do to two different people. If I wanted to purchase a house that is 10, maybe let's just say it's 2 blocks away from the school that my kids are going to, and somebody else is competing with that house who has no children that are going to that school, it may be worth a little bit more and a little bit more risk to the people that have kids that are getting ready to start school where the house is 10 or 2 blocks down. So in that instance, they may go through the house, like I said, from a real world example. What I did was I did get an inspection, but I said I'm still going to buy the house no matter what, and I'm not going to ask for any repairs. However, the second time that I went to go look at that house, I went with a contractor that I know and trust personally that went through the house with me and looked at all the major keys to the house to see the HVAC, to take a look at the roof, to put their head up in the attic, to go through all the specs of the house. Now, it's not the most thorough inspection of all time, but you could tell these people were proud owners. They took care of their home. It meant a lot to them. The foundation was in good shape. There's many things you could see ahead of time, and then all of a sudden you're taking a calculated risk on removing that inspection and giving yourself the highest probability of winning that contract in a competitive situation. It's a real tactic and technique that's going to work in the right situation for the right buyers. It worked for me.
Yeah, and that's another example of something you can do at the outset prior to making an offer. Bring someone with you to look at the home. Make keen observations about how the home is cared for. But it provides you some, again, nothing's going to be perfect. We're not talking about purchasing a brand new home. We're talking about existing homes that the inspection contingency is going to be an opportunity in the contract. We're talking about eliminating that in the right circumstance. If this home means something, has that value to you, if you're making an offer, presumably you want the home. If you're trying to make that offer as appealing as possible under the right circumstances, consider eliminating the inspection contingency. So in addition to inspect, and again, like Chris said, there's multiple levels to how you address the inspection contingency, but you should consider and consult with your agent about what makes sense in this situation for your offer. In addition to the appraisal rider, the inspection contingency, one other area is the earnest money. A simple category that's often overlooked is the category related to earnest money. And generally, if no kind of amendments are made to the contract, the earnest money is simply going to be a small amount of money that is deposited with the title insurance company and accompanies your offer. So if maybe you have a $300,000 home, $300,000 offer, maybe there's $3,000 in earnest money. And that's the contract provides that money would be refunded to you in the event of a termination. So, Chris, what are some strategies with respect to the earnest money deposit?
I would say there's a couple strategies that would work when you're doing that. One way would be to increase the amount of earnest money that you're going to put down on a house. And you could keep it refundable. So perhaps if you're going to put down, if you're going to give... Some people say they put down maybe 1% of the purchase price. But if you're buying a $300,000 house, maybe in that instance, maybe you put down $15,000 of earnest money to show, these people are serious. And it's going to go towards your down payment and closing cost when the loan closes. So that's what that money is going to go towards, but it also says that you're serious. Now, or you could maybe give 1.5% or 2%, depending on the circumstances and how strongly you want to pursue that particular home. And you can make that earnest money deposit non-refundable. So 2 different strategies, or maybe even 3. You could increase the earnest money to the highest amount that the competition is not doing and still leave it as refundable. You can put a normal amount of earnest money down, which is 1 to 2%, and request that's still refundable, or you can make an offer with a larger earnest money and make it non-refundable to give yourself the absolute strongest offer. So there's different strategies that are working in different situations, but that's something that you can implement right off the bat, and you can limit your risk based on how far along you are to close the home. If you already have all the financing in order and everything's taken place, and you have a quick closing, you've already looked and dotted all your I's and crossed all your T's, then you might as well put a larger earnest money deposit down, because the money's going to go towards closing anyways.
Yeah, so all these things we've kind of talked about, whether it's the appraisal right, or the inspection contingency, or the earnest money deposit, these all of the little manipulations to the traditional language in the contract provide some indication to the seller that the offer is serious, the offer is bold, the offer is ready to go. This person wants the house. It provides some peace of mind to the seller, as well as telling the story that this buyer wants this property. So we've kind of touched on a few, but there are others that we need to address. I mean, we haven't even touched on the price and financing, and we're going to get to that. But one thing I want to talk about now is just the closing time period. closing means something different to everyone. In other words, some people want their cash now, as soon as possible. They want to close quickly. Some people are moving out of town. Some people have already moved. And so they're ready to close as soon as possible. On the other hand, there are plenty of sellers who want an extended closing time period because they're still looking for a home, or their home is being built, or a variety of other reasons that might cause them to want a 60-day or 90-day closing. So this kind of goes to strategy, of course, knowing in advance what the seller wants. Maybe that phone call by your agent at the outset could provide information to make your offer as appealing as possible. But it also goes to the category of agility. You know, be agile so that you know what the seller wants. But you can get, when we say, Chris, I mean, let's just touch on financing for a minute, but because it applies to the closing category. What is possible in terms of a quick closing when financing is involved?
Well, when you talk about the legalities of it, because that's what's actually possible, is 7 business days. 7 business days allows for the time restrictions for the disclosures to be sent out and signed by the buyers, by the borrowers. 7 business days. So right now, this morning, I have a contract that was being submitted, and that's going to be a 10-day close. And we're able to do it at ease because we are prepared. These particular buyers have submitted their documentation. We've reviewed it. We've reviewed their income. We've reviewed their assets. We've reviewed their credit report. We've put those documents through underwriting ahead of time. A 10-day close is very achievable for certain companies, Pinnacle being one of them. Realistically, we just are. We're able to close extremely quickly and do it without stress. So that goes back to the clients being prepared and the communication between the real estate agent and the bank and the lender on should we do it in this instance. So the real estate agent takes care of the part to figure out if it's beneficial to the sellers to close quickly. We as the lender take care of the part of feasibility. We can get this loan closed in 10 days, and you could put that offer in with confidence. Then us as the lender reach out to the listing agent as well, just to let that selling agent know, listen, everything has been reviewed. You could hear it from me firsthand. These are very well qualified buyers. Everything's been reviewed and underwritten. A 10-day close will happen in the time specified, so they don't have to worry about that. We'll order the appraisal day one if one is required. Certain banks have resources to get those back. Certain do not. We have resources where we can get our appraisals back very quickly, many times within less than 4 business days from when we order it. So, and sometimes the same day. So as long as everything is in place with the preparedness, that can take place. In those instances, I mean, there is no financing contingency. That just goes with the territory because everything's already been reviewed and underwritten. So now all of a sudden, depending on how prepared you are and how agile you are, you may put yourself in a position to remove the financing contingency, remove the appraisal rider, and remove the inspection contingency if you're totally prepared and you feel confident about the property in the right place at the right time.
That's a great point, and it leads in. You touched on the financing contingency. Just to unpack it a little bit, I want to refer to the contract because the generally used contract will reference if there is a financing contingency, then it's going to reference a loan commitment deadline, and that loan commitment deadline is generally going to be a couple weeks prior to closing. Sometimes a couple days prior to closing. So sellers find that a little bit unnerving in certain instances, a little bit unappealing in certain instances because the contract may be pending for 3 or 4 weeks and before a loan commitment from the lender is even required. So in that case, a seller is going to not have a great understanding or maybe even great faith that the financing will get accomplished. So we're talking about being prepared, being strategic, and doing your work at the outset so that your financing contingency can be eliminated. And what does that mean? what does that mean, eliminating? I mean, what kind of things can make you prepared for confidently removing that financing contingency, Chris? What kind of steps can buyers take?
I mean, the steps that most buyers take is we already have their credit reviewed. And whenever we send out a pre-approval, we at the same time are requesting documentation to support that pre-approval so that we can offer a stronger pre-approval within the next couple of days, which is what we do in our process. So that means the buyer is supplying documentation such as most recent paycheck stubs, most recent bank statements, and most recent tax returns. Those are the three main things that allow a buyer to get pre-approved and through underwriting ahead of time.
Yeah, it's really important to do that because that provides assurance for the sellers and confidence for the buyers. And of course, both of the parties involved have a lot of other distractions in their lives when they're buying and selling homes. So to the extent you can be prepared and have all your financing documents in place at the outset, it's going to make your life much easier. And one other thing I wanted to highlight, one of the examples Chris provided has to do with contacting the listing agent on the part of on the part of the lender. So can you just refer to that one more time, Chris? Like, what are you talking about with respect to that?
Well, if I'm a listing agent and I receive an offer from a buyer that is and I see the offer and I look at it and I see that there's no financing contingency, and I also see that this thing is written to close in the next 10 days, then I think to myself, I don't know. Sometimes you could get skeptical of that. Is it really going to happen? Well, if they get a call from the lender and they understand it's a lender that they know and trust and has a strong reputation in this market locally, then they hear from that lender. You can tell if it's legit, if that lender's sincere, what steps have they really taken. It also gives that listing agent an opportunity to ask any additional questions to the lender that they may want to know. So that way they can go back to their seller with confidence and say, listen, we have two offers. This one is offering $250,000 and eliminated all contingencies. This one is offering $250,000 and eliminated all contingencies. But this one, I have a strong rapport with the buyer's agent, and the lender called me and gave me the warm and fuzzies and said that this is already pre-qualified. They do 10-day closings all the time. I know this lender. I checked out the reviews. They're all 5-star reviews. They have a strong reputation in the industry, and they can go back with confidence to their seller and know that loan's going to close on time, because that's what they want. They want to accept the best offer that's going to follow through. So that's the key, is just like anything else. The more touches that you have, the higher probability of you closing that deal. So knowing what they want and then giving it to them.
Yeah, and that's a good technique, or that's a good habit to do, even when there is a financing contingency. That when a specific buyer needs one, that's a good strategy for continuing to develop that rapport with and confidence with everyone involved. So we've touched on the appraisal waiver. We've touched on the inspection contingencies, the earnest money deposit, the financing contingency, and we might as well the closing time frame. And one other, we might as well talk about price. So price is another category, and some might say the most important category, but don't be fooled. All of these things that we already mentioned are extremely important in making your offer as attractive as possible. But we must talk about price. So there are beliefs about price. Some people like to go in and just never offer the price that's being requested. They don't feel comfortable with it. We're going to talk about strategies with that. So, and ways to increase your offer price if necessary. But first of all, let's just deal with without talking about escalation clauses or anything. Let's just deal with what to offer for a particular property. So this goes to that initial call at the outset where your agent is perhaps asking the listing agent, what's it going to take to get this done? And to the extent information is shared there, hopefully you can make an offer in line with what's going to get this deal done. And we need to, the price matters with respect to the appraisal. So, Chris, what are some strategies or maybe even opinions we can provide about how to address price in this environment? Because, this is not the environment of offering $30,000 under the list price and hoping and praying.
No, I mean, the houses that are going to be getting multiple offers. You know what those houses are, and those houses are always going to be selling for over the asking price. The asking price these days is that's not even the right word for it. They're not even asking prices anymore. They're research numbers that are sometimes designed to increase more traffic. Obviously, some of them are strategically priced a little bit lower what the market will bear to drive more traffic to it and let the demand increase the price of it. So obviously, I think, like you said, it's going to come a lot from the intel. But if you're within $5,000 of another offer, but this person removed an inspection contingency and this other couple just could not stomach it, then that's where you figure out the pain points and what is the most important to these sellers. Maybe it's price, maybe it's not. We know price is going to have something to do with it. But it's certainly going to be over asking price. Now, I know that you had mentioned escalation clause. I mean, we might as well touch on that while we're on that topic, but the escalation clause is a very important and useful clause. Recently did a deal that the escalation clause was used and it closed. In this particular instance, I'll give you the numbers with it. In this particular instance, the house was listed for $850,000, and there were 10 offers on the house. And the person that won the contract had an escalation clause up to $1,015,000. They were going to beat the highest offer by $2,000 up to $1,015,000. So, and that person ended up winning the contract, and they won the contract at $950,000 because that is what that was $2,000 less than the closest offer. So they didn't have to go up to their $1,015,000, but the escalation clause worked in that instance, and they were very happy with their purchase because they knew that house would appreciate, and they were able to get it because in that case, the listing agent, they have to adhere to the offers that they actually get. I mean, they can't just make up an offer out of the blue. It has to be offers that they actually get. So that's how that escalation clause works. And a lot of people right now are thinking to themselves, they don't want to overpay for a house. And it's a very important consideration, but at the same time, you are looking to buy a home that you're going to live in. So what it means to you or what it's worth to you is always going to be different than what it's worth to somebody else. You have to put that in perspective. Life changes. I mean, rates have more than doubled over the past year and a half, but values and demand, they've stayed the same or even went up in some areas of the country. So St. Louis and Missouri, the demand is high, and that's what's keeping values up. So some people are concerned, is there going to be a housing bubble? Well, just to report a couple statistics from NAR, the National Association of Realtors, who have strong legislation. They have a lot to do with what happens in real estate and in laws and what happens in the market, and they make a lot of predictions. Well, they're predicting a 10% jump in home sales in 2024 from 2023, with a 5% increase in price. So are we in a housing bubble? Most real estate professionals and the National Association of Realtors would say we are not, because if you think about the inventory levels, when we did have a housing bust back in 2008, the inventory levels were about 25% or right now our inventory levels are about 25% of what they were in 2008. So there is large demand right now, and that's going to keep the prices up. Distressed property sales are almost inexistent. They're at 2%. And whenever we were in 2008 and we had the crash, distressed sales were at 30%. Short sales are basically inexistent because of the appreciated values of these homes. So there is opportunity. Sure, if you buy a house right now for maybe $10,000 more than you wanted to purchase it for, well, If you wait 6 months, there's a cost of waiting, because in that 6-month period, you figure that value, as predicted by NAR, is going to go up 2.5% in 6 months. So if you wait 6 months because you didn't want to go up that $10,000, well, all of a sudden, that home is appreciated. So now the houses that you're looking at in the market are going to be 2.5% higher. So they're going to be higher than it would have been if you would have just purchased that house for a little bit of a higher price than you wanted to 6 months prior to. Also, we don't know what's going to happen with interest rates right now. I mean, some people say, hey, you might have an opportunity to refinance in the coming months to get to a lower interest rate. And some people are predicting that rates are going to go up a little bit more, or some people are going to say this going to stay the same. But just to give you some numbers, get out the pencil and paper. On a $500,000 home, 5% is $25,000. So if you buy a $500,000 home in a year from now, if NAR is correct, then you'll have $25,000 more equity in that home in 1 year. Now, on a $500,000 home, if you get that at 7%, the principal and interest payment, your principal and interest payment is $33.27 at 7%. But if you get that same home at $500,000 home and you get it at 8%, that's $3,669. That's a difference of $342 a month from the 7% to the 8%. And you have the $25,000. So I'm just saying, if you waited from 1 year to the next and rates went up and values went up, well, that's your cost of waiting. So the average person stays in a home for, let's say, 7 years in the United States. That's a difference of $28,728 in extra principal and interest payments, and that's $25,000 in the appreciated value, because the house that you buy in a year from now is going to be $25,000 more. So it's $52,700 from 1 year to the next if rates go up by 1 point and values go up by 5%. So that's a real life example of the cost of waiting to purchase. So I know that you're saying, hey, I'm not trying to wait. I want to buy now. I'm in the market now. I want to put an aggressive offer in now. Well, what we want to do is be strategic, be agile, be prepared.
I love having this data available, Chris. Please call us to discuss these strategies and others. We'd love to talk to you. We have a lot of great ideas right now. We want to introduce all of this into the community so that people can realize the home buying opportunities that they desire. Subscribe to the Mortgage and Real Estate Podcast by Pinnacle Home Loans. We look forward to hearing from you soon.